يبدو أن معانا اثنين من الإخوان. السلام عليكم. دكتور محمد الزهراني معانا؟ أوكي الظاهر ما.
Maybe delegates are only in listen mode only.
Just want to make sure, yeah.
Yeah.
دكتور محمد.
No.
مرحبا. حياك الله.
حياكم الله.
Just want to make sure that الصوت أوكي، كل شيء تمام.
اي واضح يعطيكم العافيه.
الله يعافيك. حياك الله.
احنا بس عشان راح نسوي ميوت الحين حق الاتنديز just to make sure.
اوكي.
الان نبدا يعني في 3 دقائق ان شاء الله.
طيب ان شاء الله.
اوكي.
يعطيكم بس دكتور الصوت يقطع.
انا اشوف الصوت، انا عندي مشكله هم ما اشوف صوت الدكتور محمد.
كثير أنا عندي الإشارة ممتازة لكن ما أسمع، الصوت يقطع بشكل كبير.
انا قاعد اشوف الدكتور المتحدث دكتور محمد.
إيه.
معنا دكتور
يبدو لي من عند الدكتور، من عند
عن-
الدكتور سبيكر.
خلنا كلمه أنا بالتليفون انا اشوف.
طيب
يبدو ان عنده مشكله بالصوت الان، حيطلع ويرجع مره ثانيه، فان شاء الله يشتغل تمام.
أفضل يعطيك العافية.
نعتذر شوية، بس خلنا الأخ الدكتور محمد الحين يرد الاتصال بالبلاتفورم.
أستاذ محمد، ممكن تعطينا نبذة طيب عن
أوكي.
الفعالية هذه؟
هي
النشاط
كانت، أنا أقول لك بالأصل كان مؤتمر الداتا أناليتكس اللي عدينا له، كان المفروض في 15 و16 أبريل اللي طاف.
ما شاء الله.
كان في الجبيل. أنا بس
جميل.
أعرف دكتور محمد من وين، عفوا من أي جهة؟
أنا من أستاذ مساعد Assistant Professor of Computer Science، وتخصصي الدقيق في الداتا ساينس والبيج داتا والسوشيال ميديا مايننج.
ممتاز.
وعندي شركة خاصة يعني شغالين على مجموعة تطبيقات سوشيال ميديا وتطبيقات سياحية أيضا.
حلو حلو حلو. هو كان عندنا مؤتمر اسمه الداتا أناليتكس، مؤتمر
أوكي.
يعني كان فيه حوالي 18 متحدث، يعني من اللي كان يمكن تعرف الدكتورة فاطمة بعثمان،
معروفة.
دكتور حمود ودوسري، ومجموعة كبيرة من داخل السعودية.
معروفين.
اي. فاللي صار تعرف انت كورونا وسوالفها، فعطلت ولا كان الامور ماشيه يعني. وكان مؤتمر رائع وفي حضور تسجيل من الجهات الحكوميه، ويعني جهات كبيره وكثيره. لكن
الحمد لله.
ان اي، فصارت انه اوكي، قلنا شفنا الحركه على موضوع
أونلاين.
الاونلاين وهذا، فبدينا نشتغل على اكثر من، سوينا اكثر من احداث بالبروكيورمنت باللوجيستكس لامس، واجتماعاتنا طبعا كلها تغيرت، صارت كذا. فهي تجربه حقيقه، فقلنا بدل ما تكون مؤتمر بالكامل يصير ورشه اللي مثل الويبينار.
جميل جميل. يعطيكم العافيه.
وهو كان احد المتحدثين معنا. بس الحين ابي ادخله معانا، بس عطني شويه بعد، اعتذر منك دقيقه بس.
خذ راحتك، خذ وقتك، خذ وقتك.
الو دكتور اسمعني؟ I hope that everybody can hear me now.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, طيب. Let me just quickly share my screen. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. ومعذرة for this hookup. My name is Mohammed Qaydoum. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Logartim. Logarithim is inspired by Al-Khwarizmi, like anybody knows about algorithms and so on. We are based here in Abu Dhabi. Basically, the content for today is really trying to lay out a foundation on how to help companies and government agencies basically build their data. I call it the data foundation. Now, this needs a set of prerequisites. One of them is to be able to assess how mature is your data, and that will help you definitely develop the strategy. How do you go about finding the data within the organization, or even sometimes externally through what we call the data cataloging? Then how we actually go on a large scale using what we call an AI-powered human-guided approach to data mastering. And what we mean by mastering really is we talk about data integration, unification, some people call it harmonization as well, data cleansing, and data classification. But what I'm trying to basically put down together, before that, actually, I'm a chemical engineer, but I never worked as a chemical engineer, unfortunately. I have been always in the executive management. Now, being an engineer and being somebody who did a lot of statistical analysis during his PhD, basically research, that has basically led me to look at business problems always from a data and analytics. So what I'm going to share with you really is a certain very basic approach, which hopefully lays down the roadmap to success, to organization success. The first thing that you really need to start with, and that's why we see a high level or a great percentage of AI programs, analytics programs fail miserably because of the lack of a winning strategy, a winning business strategy. Then after that, what are the capabilities that an organization has to build as far as analytics and data is concerned? Then after that, we will focus on today's topic, which is really the data. Now, as a company, just quickly, what we do is we focus most of our time on data. And basically, our mission is really to help companies be what we call it data ready, so that they wouldn't spend and waste 60 to 80% of their time trying to find where is the data, how accurate and reliable is the data. We would like to help them do that. Why? We want them to achieve and accelerate results to their analytics and the AI basically objectives. Now, we offer something called the data mastering. Both we offer the technology through a partnership with some companies that you will see in a minute, and we offer also services. Some companies, they wanted the technology, others, they wanted the technology and services. We can do that. So basically, the first step that we always recommend to our client is really, before talking AI, before talking machine learning analytics, you really need to assess where you stand as far as data is concerned. This, like I said, involves three pieces. One of them is be able to assess your maturity, your data maturity. And that should really help you develop your strategy. Second, and we are associated with a company from the US called Eckerson Group. Then we have something called the data cataloging, to be able, exactly like Google, when you enter a set of keywords, you should be able to see all the data that are related to a specific problem that you want to solve from an analytics perspective. Then the theme, today's theme, will be really on the data mastering, and I will not spend a lot of time because this will be our theme. And finally, the data wrangling, and again, is how, once I have produced the unified view of the data, once my data is reliable, okay, and I have, say, 1,000 attributes or columns, like some people, or variables, some people call them, how can I make it 1,500, for instance? We'll give some examples on that. Now, in addition to that, we help companies also digitize their legacy and unstructured data, like for instance, the engineering drawings, the seismic data, the video streaming, and so on. Now, like I said, I'm based in Abu Dhabi, and my interest in analytics probably started many, many years back. I think I'm talking about 2001, 2002, where actually we had a network at that time of 170 gas stations, like the one you see, the beautiful one here in Abu Dhabi, and around probably 3,000 employees. And we wanted really to optimize the manpower. You see, the guys who operate the station, we call them the operation or the retail operation, always ask for more people. I need 2 people here, 3 in that shift, 5 in that station, and so on. And honestly, there wasn't a clear model for manpower. The guys, whenever we try to basically negotiate with them on the manpower, they said, no, that's our experience. We know best the industry. Unfortunately, I didn't know the industry. So I had to recruit basically a PhD in statistics in order to do the modeling. ADNOC was one, honestly, of the leading organization way in the early 2000 of the last century. Basically, we automated all the forecourt, so we were able to know all the transaction in the station, and we were actually able to model and come up with a model that had the potential to reduce the manpower by 35%, which really translates like 50 million dirhams a year for a petroleum retailer. Now, moving back, I need to spend a bit of time on the issue of strategy. And the strategy, in my view, is extremely important because as a company, like I said before, if you don't really have a winning business strategy, or as a government, if you are not really positioning yourself as a government or government agency to win in the market, forget about the technology, forget about AI, it will not deliver miracles. So I'm inspired, honestly, by Peter Drucker and this gentleman who said, way back, Drucker said that the characteristic of the innovator is the ability to envisage as a system what other people see as unrelated separate element. And this is really tells me about one thing. It tells me about something which we call the global, the optimization, the global optimization. Because as an engineer, we were taught that when you try to optimize a system, you would be surprised to find that one of the most optimum is looks to you as a good optimum. For instance, if you're talking about a refinery and being a chemical engineer, you think that by, I don't know, optimizing the reactor or the heat exchangers, you did a great job. But that contribution is really nothing compared to what you could have achieved when you're trying to optimize the whole, refinery. So based on that, and this is what we are promoting now. So instead of really looking at 1 or 2 data sources, or 4 or 5, now we would like to look globally at all the data sets available, at all the attributes, the variables available. For instance, we are speaking to a government agency, and we know for a fact that there is a very strategic national KPI that is influenced by so many government agencies, by so many objectives, by so many contradictions and interactions and constraints. How can we model and predict whether this KPI would achieve its target after 5 years, after 10 years, or don't know, if we don't really look at the problem holistically? So that's what we are saying through this presentation. And when you look at the data, really, the data is like a mesh, like a network, of things that are linked together, that many times conflict against each other. And unless you really understand the relationship and the interaction and the cross interaction between these different phenomena, you will never be able to solve the problem in a holistic way. Now, coming back to the data, and this gentleman, Jeffrey Moore, said many years back that really, without big data analytics, companies are blind and deaf. And I think he's right. Just wandering around like a deer on a highway, on a freeway. So companies that have really implemented successfully and innovated in the use of data and analytics have achieved significant results. For instance, this is a study from Bain that says, for instance, companies are maybe 2 times more likely to be in the top quartile of their financial performance. They are 5 times more likely to make market decision based faster because when you have the data and you have the insight, you will not wait for 1 year to take a decision or a strategic decision because you have the data. Thus, that by itself represents a huge advantage. Now, having said that, the data, the analytics had to be created through what we call a culture, an analytics culture. And I'm going to share with you a few examples here, because from my experience and the experience of many people, when you want to speak to somebody to basically start an analytics project, the first thing that they will tell you, listen, we know the business far better than you do, and that's true. And what they will tell you, oh no, the data is ours, so it's a silo, so you don't own the data. And this also reminds me of a case with one of the companies where basically the operation or the chief operation officer asked me for additional. There was an incident where the guy sent me an urgent email saying that I need exactly 16 drivers. Why? Because the business, the sales has increased by 20%. Now, when you receive an urgent email like this, you need to respond. Well, I couldn't really respond. So the first question I asked this gentleman, listen, tell me please, what is currently the utilization of your drivers? And guess what? The answer is, I don't know. And it's true, he didn't know. Okay, give us the data to look at the performance. No, the data is mine. We don't share the data with you. Well, we were struggling to get the data for about 3 months. And when we got the data, believe me, the utilization was, like you see that number there, 63%. Why? Because the culture of the data, the culture of looking at the numbers to take decision was not really there. I remember also a case from LinkedIn, the gentleman, you know him, Reid Hoffman. You see, he had somebody working in LinkedIn, and he had this idea that if we introduce a small algorithm, and later on it became to be called people you might know, that could increase, because if Muhammad knows Ali and Ali knows Ahmed and so on, you see that the click-through rate will increase drastically. The management said no. So he used to work with Reid before, so he approached him indirectly. Now Reid Hoffman asked him basically to use it as a test. Just don't force it. Just use it as a test. And when he used the new algorithm, there was an increase of 30% in the CTR. So this is just how the leader basically institute the analytics and the use of data culture. Amazon, nobody really can challenge them in the issue of the data and so on. There is this gentleman, Gary Loveman, who used to be the CEO and president of Caesars Entertainment. He said, always challenge his managers. Do you know or do you think? And another gentleman said, in God we trust and all others bring data. So this by itself, this thinking, this behavior, this attitude creates what we call the data culture in the organization. So people tend to use the data and respect the use of the data for their decision making. Now, in my own company, many years back, I worked in one of the oil companies at Mock, and I worked in the utilities, Abu Dhabi Water and Electricity, and we developed basically what I call a strategy map and a balance scorecard. And in my view, without a clear, well-articulated strategy map that basically articulates the strategic assumptions of an organization, don't expect a lot. And if you don't have a mechanism also to monitor the implementation, the execution of your strategy, again, you don't have a lot of chance of success. Now, look at this. The trend today that we are promoting is really, there is 3 pieces that have to be integrated. Historically, like you know, we had the good guys like the McKinseys, the BCG, the Bain, and so on, who are excellent in basically in strategy development and formulation. Then we had Kaplan and Norton for their performance scorecard. That's well good. And each discipline has its own merits. Then later on, our company, we have introduced this concept also of using the data. So what we're trying to say here is, when you go about developing your strategy, it's there where you really need to deploy and employ the data. Because like I said, the definition of strategy is really a set of strategic hypotheses. Now, if you can express the cause and effect relationship in those hypotheses, you have a highly likelihood that you will produce a good strategy. Again, when you are reviewing your strategy on a monthly or quarterly basis, use the data, because you said I had a set of hypotheses. Now you want to validate and test those basically hypotheses, and be able also even to predict if am I going to achieve my performance at the end of the year? Am I going to achieve my vision after 5 years or 10 years and so on? And analytics also to connect the different data. I will talk about them later on. So really, when you think about a strategy map, and that's why I strongly recommend that companies start with this, because this is the relationship, and this is the vital question that you see here on the left, on the right. Because many companies, they go and invest in the technology, and they start asking themselves, what's the best use case that we start with? You don't need to ask this question, honestly, because if you had a good strategy, your strategy, like we defined, is a set of hypotheses. You see them here, H1, H2. So what we are claiming, for instance, very, very basically, if we really train and develop and create the right environment for our employee, does it really generate financial return? Does it really help improve processes, and so on and so forth? So ideally speaking, once we have formulated our strategy and articulated it the way you see it here on screen, then the next question is, yes, okay, now we can use analytics. We have a problem with that objective. We have a problem with that KPI. How can we use data and analytics basically to solve those problems? So instead of just wandering around and trying to, like I said, solve the problems of the world, now we need to focus on what we have first. Just quick use case that I know I recall from many, many years ago from my time in ADNOC is there was this beautiful case from Sears, and unfortunately a couple of years back, Sears and Reebok, they went bankrupt, unfortunately, because they deviated from their strategy. They did the research using their very limited data. They said that if we can create a compelling place to work, that should lead the creation of what we call a compelling place to shop, and a compelling place to invest. They said that if we just can increase the employee attitude, satisfaction, and so on, and engagement by 5%, that has driven a 1.5 unit increase in the customer impression, which drives about 0.5% decrease in the revenue. And this has been validated with data. So this was as early as 1998. Now, the question is, we ask ourselves, okay, if this what analytics can do for our organization, where do we need to start? So our recommendation, although there is 4 or 5 slides from our partner, we are exclusive partner to the International Institute of Analytics, basically founded by Tom Davenport, who wrote the first book on competent on analytics. This is a bestseller. Basically, you really need to assess yourselves as far as data analytics and the enablers for that, as far as they are concerned. Where do you stand as an organization? Tom Davenport and his team have developed this basically 5-level or 5 stages of analytics maturity, starting with something like he called an analytics beginner, where data is not utilized at all, into really like analytical competitors like the Amazon of the world, the native digitals, the Facebooks and the Googles, and so on. So there is 3 tools that you can do there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. One is at the enterprise level, there is something called analytics maturity assessment. And you have something to do, another assessment for your technology guys. And then an overall, basically inventory of skills, analytic skills, starting even, would you believe, with the secretary. She's receiving an emails, she's communication, phone calls, and so on. How can she use the data basically to help her manager use his time or her time effectively? Now, we use a model developed, of course, by Tom Davenport and his team. It's called the Delta model, where we look at the data, you look at the enterprise, you look at the leadership commitment and passion to implement analytics and so on. How is it tied basically to the business objectives, the target? What's the quality of your people who do the analytics, right from the guys sitting in the finance, in the HR, to the operation? All these people have to be able basically to use analytics in their day-to-day basically work. Now, the Delta is based on a set of criteria. We will not spend any time on that. But a couple of years back, the IIA basically conducted research. They wanted to see if there is any relationship with the analytics maturity and financial performance. And they took a sample of companies over a period of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and so on. And they were actually able to demonstrate that the more mature the organization in terms of analytics, the better financial performance it would achieve. Now, according to their research, many organizations globally, especially in the US, who are supposed to be leading in this area, the average is basically less than 2 out of a scale of 6. And here, just a quick basically slide showing you basically the different sectors, different segments within those sectors and industries. And you will be surprised, we are at the age of the corona and the healthcare providers are at the bottom. So which is really shocking compared, for instance, to the financial services, to the retail, and so on and so forth. So just for you to understand. And one of the problems that the healthcare faces these days is really the inability to connect and unify different data sources to try to understand the health problem. Why we are having this problem? Because somebody is claiming it's been started in a lab. Do you really have the data to justify that? They are saying, but it's from wild animals. Okay, do you have that? Is spreading in the US rather than or more than Europe, and more Europe more than the Middle? What is driving that? It's only the data that can basically determine that. Now, let's look at the importance of data. And this slide is really taken from one of our partners, the Eckerson, and it was recently given by Wayne Eckerson, who is really the founder, president of the company. Like you know, like you see on this chart, companies, many of companies, even in the West, they are really still in the business intelligence, and even sometimes the business intelligence is not done properly. We would like companies, or actually leading companies, are moving towards using AI, basically not only to achieve their target, but actually to transform their business, to change their business model. And to do that, basically they are going through phases, what he calls the evolution of the intelligence, whereby in the past, we used to rely on our judgment, our instinct, basically to take a decision. Then we said, okay, we have some data, we have some dashboards, we have some KPIs. Let's look at them in a summarized way and use our judgment to drive business decisions. We are now at a stage where, okay, we are using the data, we are using AI models, and the AI models is given at different options, so that we can evaluate different scenarios, and using our human judgment, we can take a decision. But the future, the trend is really for the AI to become sort of autonomous, whereby it takes some input from us and it should drive the decision by itself. And this is coming in the next few years. To achieve that level, and this is really the cornerstone of our discussion today, of our presentation, is the issue of the data. Now, if you wanted to have AI models, machine learning models that are accurate, you really need to supplement them with so many data sources, so many attributes. Because from experience, from the use cases that we are seeing nowadays, is the more data you have, the more accurate the model will be. But unfortunately, when you look at the industry, from a business point of view, again, according to research that was published by McKinsey recently, only 3% of organizations' data meet the minimum quality standards. And this is so shocking. They basically give the example of a company, a large organization, that spent millions of dollars over 2 years trying to unify the data, but they failed. Another company here, or a large oil company in the GC, a colleague of mine works there, and he said the company basically spent around $20 million with many years with a very large, basically technology company, and they couldn't finish the job. Why? Because they are using the traditional old style companies. So really, when you look at the government agencies, it's not even better, because only 45% of developers who work for government agencies agree that the government data is clean. Right? So, and you wouldn't be surprised if you see this quote on the right, according to Forbes magazine, which identified the medical research that has 100 terabytes of data, which is ultimately copied and retained by 18 different teams and required more than 10 petabytes of storage. Why? Because each team, they think that no, we are the owner of the data, that we use the data differently. And this is the problem of having basically disparate siloed approach to data. Now, just quickly on the data basically strategy, because we said you need to assess, to do a maturity assessment for your data. We will show some examples. But what we really mean by enterprise data strategy is, what is our company approach? What is our government agency approach to use data basically to deliver and leverage data to achieve the business agenda, to the business objectives? How we can compete and thrive in the modern economy using the data. Excuse me, take some water. Then how can we ensure that the data is well managed like an asset? I don't know, we care a lot about the financial assets. We care a lot about the physical assets, but it seems that we don't really care a lot about the data. The data is becoming a critical, important asset. And to develop that strategy, we really need to align many stakeholders who in many cases have conflicting basically interests and objectives. This issue of the data silo, or this thinking, oh, this data is in my department, in my business unit, I own it. Nobody else in the organization is allowed to see it. This cultural thinking has to go away. We need to get rid of this. And the biggest problem as well is putting together the technology guys and the business guys, especially the leadership, together to work on a technology that delivers the strategy. My experience in one of the banks here, a very large bank, they bought this very, very expensive, both software and hardware, by the way, and it was bought by the IT. The IT asked the business units basically to work on it, and they couldn't figure out how to use that technology. They brought external consultant to help them, and they failed. They asked basically the technology vendor to do it for them. They said, okay, we can do it, but again, you need to buy that technology and so on and so forth. So we need to move away from this concept that the data is just a byproduct of the business process of our ERP system. We really need to look at it strategically. There is many frameworks, by the way, to develop the data strategy. This is one is adopted from SAS, the one of the most successful, basically, analytics and data tech company. And will not spend much time on that. Now, in terms of the maturity, we are assigned with another company that actually level 1, we think that everybody in level 1. But think about it, level 2 is many companies, they don't even have something called a data strategy. They are reluctant to use the cloud, although the trends, the global trends, all of it is going to the direction that cloud will replace everything. The issue of the architecture, data warehouse, some people are saying that, okay, we have a data warehouse and it has solved our problems. It doesn't, unfortunately. The issue of the organization, what's the role? Do they have any people like the CDO, Chief Data Officer? I don't know, Chief Analytics Officer? Do you have a data scientist? Are they working centrally or decentralized fashion and so on? Until you reach a stage or level 5, where really you have a clear data strategy, you view basically the data as an asset, it's reported in your financial statement, the executives know about it, they monitor it, and they ask question why it's not really, especially when you start talking about monetization, data monetization, why it's not really adding the value and so on. The technology, a combination of basically the cloud, the on-prem, the issue of the technology, MDMs, and the ETL, the organization, how your data, how your analytics is structured. I will not spend time on that, but what I'm trying to tell you guys is you really need to assess where you stand. Now, I already mentioned before, I spoke about the analytics maturity assessment. The data is one component of that. So assuming that your leadership is engaged, you have the right talent, you have the right, basically, organization culture, organization behavior, and so on. Here, the focus of this talk is only data, by the way. Now, let's talk about the issue of the data integration. Now, when you think about the issue of basically the government, for instance, for government are always trying to design policies that hopefully will help the economy, will help the society, will help the environment. And from time to time, they evaluate those policies to see if really the policies has delivered its intent. But if you were basically to ask a question, let me just remove this. Okay, no problem. So if the government wants to invest into new economic sectors, will it be able to say what actually those economic sectors will be, and what will be the impact on the employment, or basically on the property in the city, on the real, basically on the traffic, on the and so on and so forth. You cannot answer these holistic, big ticket questions unless your data across the city or even across the government is integrated together. Another example, for instance, for the corporations. Today, companies have got hundreds of systems, the ERP, the CAD, the CRMs, I don't know, and so forth. If we were, you see, these systems, the data from these systems should help us really, again, ask and answer very big questions. For instance, what would be the bottom line, or what would be basically a new business model in the next 3 to 5 years that will have impactful impact on our triple bottom line, which is the profit, the people, and the society. Today, people maybe rely on some financial data, maybe they rely on some operation data, but very few people actually rely on integrated set of data sources to really take that decision. So this is what we're trying to tell you guys. The problem with, by the way, assuming that we have this belief and that we really need to integrate data, people who work in the analytics space, the data analysts, the data scientists, the data engineers, today they struggle. First of all, they don't know. Anybody who works with analytics would really know what are the data available in our organization, what are the external data that we can make use of. And today we are associated with a company, with a technology company that actually has developed something exactly like Google, where you only enter your keywords and Google will basically crawl the websites, index them, and basically rank the sites in a fraction of a second. Okay, now we have the technology to do something like this. Now, assume somebody is working on your customer retention or basically production optimization. Asking this question and be able to relate and discover all the data that have anything to do with these big questions is extremely important. Not only that he or she be able to find the data, they should find comments about the data. Is it good? Is it good quality data? Is it complete? Is it trustable? And so on and so forth. The second thing, she has to use the technology to integrate quickly. So you don't want to wait 1 year to solve a problem because you're struggling to integrate multiple sources of data. This issue of, you see, 20%, 15 to 20% of the data sets are wrong. And somebody has to clean them, somebody has to remove the duplication and so on, right? So I'm just going to quickly share with you, like I said before, some screenshots from our basically partners. This is just for coronavirus. Now, if you have a technology that by just entering the word corona virus, and it should give you as a data analysis all the data sets that are available, all the articles related to that, all the comments by other people within and outside the organization. Think about it when you find this richness of information at your fingerprint. Okay. You see, how much time would you save? You are saving months instead of years, and days instead of weeks. Think about it. You just enter case, for instance, and it is listing down all the queries. Other people have used some good queries within the organization. But today, without the data catalog,
دكتور يعطيك العافية، الصوت يقطع دكتور.
اعطونا بس دقيقه خلينا نشوف الوضع. دكتور محمد معاي؟
اوكي معك دكتور. نعم
خلاص اوكي الصوت تمام. ها
I think تمام. Sometimes I get a signal that
عموما الان اوكي الوضع اوكي.
اوكي تمام ان شاء الله. زين. So once we basically once we discovered through our Google like search the
الصوت مو موجود دكتور.
I don't know, am I muted?
لا you are okay now. You are not muted.
اوكي طيب.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, one. Okay, so I was telling you guys that when we have the technology, the AI-powered technology, to find out all the different data sets that are relevant to our study, we can start building what we call a unified
يبدو الشبكة ضعيفة عندك دكتور.
Surprised that the sound is working. Can I continue, Doctor?
Continue.
Sorry, gentlemen, the delegates and the ladies. Sorry about that. Now, again, assuming that we have discovered the data, but the data will never be in a unified view that we can use from day one. Tamer.
دكتور الصوت في مشكلة. الصوت شو الحين
والله نعم
أنا ما أعرف شو يصير لما أتكلم. يعني ما ودي أقاطع لكن الآن الآن الصوت أوكي موجود.
Okay. Well, if دكتور يعني if it gets worse, I'm sorry, probably we can stop it.
أوكي. إيش رأيك تطلع وترجع مرة ثانية أو أهلا دكتور. يبدو أن الدكتور شوية طلع أساس يرجع مرة ثانية. خلنا نعطيه دقيقتين وإن شاء الله نكمل.
أي مشكلة. بالعافية.
I hope okay now.
تمام.
طيب let me share my screen. Okay, sorry about that. My apology. Why I am unmuted? Okay, very good. Let me continue, please. Okay, so the expectation of the business people is the data is sorted out in a very logical way, like customers, like product, like I don't know, parts. But honestly, when you think about it, it is never the case. Why? Because like I said, this data is simply not integrated, not clean, and so on. So what we need to do, okay, I was going to show you a video here, but probably I will defer it. The problem with the data, like many of us know, is these 3 V's, which is really the volume, the velocity, and the variety. Now, in terms, as far as technology is concerned, you see, you take Oracle, you take IBM, SAP, they have solved the problem of the volume. A lot of startups have actually solved the problem of live streaming and the velocity and so on, sensor data and so on. But when it comes to the variety of the data, especially if you have 100, 200, probably 50 data sources, 10,000, nobody has solved that problem, in my view, except a company that I'm going to talk about here quickly. So, according to Michael, and some of the slides, by the way, are taken from our company, our partners, especially the founder, a gentleman called Michael Stonebreaker, who is really the founder of this company. And before that, the founder of Ingress, Postgres, Vertica, and so on. And he is adjunct professor in MIT. And he's a guy who got the award for what I call the Turing Award, which is like a Nobel Prize for computer science. The guys in the computer science know that. Now, he says that a typical enterprise has got like 500 data stores. A big telco company can have up to 10,000 different data. You're talking about ERP data, you're talking about maintenance data, you're talking about CRMs and finance and so on and so forth. Now, why do we have so many data stores? Naturally, because you see, businesses are divided into business units. And traditionally, each business unit has got its own systems. And I'm going to share with you a use case from GE, General Electric, on this. Then, over the years, companies merge and others buy other companies. So basically, the variety of the data even increases. The CFO, the finance guys still use basically Excel, and some of them, okay, they use ERP systems, but you have a lot of information from the operation, from, I don't know, the maintenance, from the call center. And plus the advantage of adding external data. You would like to know what's the impact of the weather or the population, or I don't know, other types on your business. So ultimately, like I said before, the more data, internal and external data you have, the more attributes you have, the more accurate AI models that you can produce. But unfortunately, the way companies have tried to solve this problem is they go and they develop something called the global schema or global data model, where they expect everybody in the organization to follow that model. From a theory point of view, this is good, but unfortunately, it has shown us that no one can achieve this global schema. Why? Because different customers could have different, basically, IDs. Product have different IDs, different names. And from experience, especially, like I said, these slides are taken from Stonebreaker. Many projects take years, and like he said, on day one, they are already out of date. Why? Because you have new data sources that have come on board. You have something that has changed. So it is the way that companies have approached that. It is really writing rules and having IT guys or developer write it. It never works. It never scale up. I mean, the message I'm trying to say here, I'm talking about scalability. If you have 2 or 3, 4, 5, or 10 data sources, you can use the traditional rule base, which is the ETL, MDM. We'll talk about that. But the question is why we want to integrate data. Like I said before, be it for a government or be it for this, you're talking about optimization of it. You want to design a new policy for the unemployment, for instance. How can you solve this problem? Problem of accommodation, problem of housing. These are big national problems, which incidentally by one ministry or one agency can never be solved. The issue of marketing. If you have a business with a lot of business units, How can we cross-sell, upsell? Cost reduction. We'll show some examples as well. And of course, having accurate BI dashboards. Nowadays, I'm aware of a company, very large company, that has got like a huge screen of dashboard, pulling the data from different companies, and it is taking them a hell of a lot of time, basically, to be able to program and get that data. So ultimately, data integration is a really very big data problem. Why? Because, like I said, traditional tools have failed to do the job. Traditionally, like I said, you see the data is converted or is exported to Excel sheet file. The guys will basically look at it, see if there is any possible inconsistencies, and say, okay, the data is fine. Then we can, there's another approach, which is really what I call the rule-based basically approach, which we're going to talk about. And nowadays is what I call the ML-driven, machine learning-driven, human basically assisted, where we train a machine learning model basically and let the machine do what I call the heavy lifting. Now, in terms of the data curation, which is really preparing the data, is we have a process to ingest the data from different sources. We want to make sure that and validate it so that hopefully that garbage in is not garbage out. The data involves a transformation, like I said, for instance, some of the price is given in euros, whereas you need to convert it to $1 to have a uniform currency. Some companies, for instance, say this is my salary in Europe. In other places, it's wages, and you really need to make sure that you solve all this duplication and inconsistency problem. So there is 3 generations to solve this problem. There is what I call the traditional ETL. Then there is something what I call the ETL steroids, which is really MDM, which is the master data management. And as we speak now, there is something called the scalable data curation, which is machine learning driven tools. The first generation 1 is really the early data warehouses, whereby companies like Walmart and those big companies, they found out that by integrating the sales data into one single data warehouse, they are able actually to do their basically BI, their data, and they are able to see which product move together, what season, what are the drivers, and so on and so forth. So basically, this technology of the data warehouse for this large organization, because of the value that they basically achieved, they were able, the data warehouse itself was paying for itself in less than 6 months. Then the rest of the big enterprise followed suit. Until today, we are hearing about companies doing the data warehouse, nowadays the data lake, and so on and so forth, all using what we call the ETL thing. But unfortunately, from the research done by many, on average, a project on an ETL project is always 2 to 3 times over the budget. It's always 2 to 3 times late than the delivery. And basically, it doesn't happen. For instance, what you see here on the right, this is just what I call a process and instrumentation diagram. Think about it. Recently, somebody asked us to try to digitize this, okay? So basically, for the guys who are not engineers, this is just a representation of a physical asset, like say a heat exchanger, for instance, a reactor. And you have the instrumentation that go with that. Now, the diagram shows us a certain measurement, like so the pressure, the temperature, devices like the controllers, like indicator. Now, we want somebody basically to take these drawings page by page, drawing by drawing, and try to extract that information and put them in Excel sheet so that that Excel sheet is fed into the maintenance system in order to do some analytics. There is 1 million of these for one client only. Now think about it. How many years you would need to process this type of document and digitize it and extract the features from it for a number like 1 million. And another client maybe have 10 millions of this. I'm talking about large oil and gas companies, utilities, and so on. But with machine learning, you train basically with humans, of course, a few drawings, and you start basically the algorithm start learning and gradually start processing this document, these drawings automatically, of course, always with the help of the human. Now, why the data integration is hard? Because like I said, for instance, on an invoice or basically financial records, you will find that one record, we bought $100,000 of widget from IBM with their headquarters, for instance, in New York. There is another record, 800,000 euros of widget, not widget, but from IBM in Spain, their affiliate in Spain. Then we have something like -999, which really for some people means basically a code for that the data is missing. So how can you solve all these problems using basically a rule-based? Is impossible. So basically the traditional ETL, like I said, just quickly, their architecture is you are pulling the data from different systems. You have already agreed on a schema with the global schema, but for each data there is its own local schema. So the ETL process is trying basically to bring all those data sources together in order basically to produce a global schema. And I'm aware of a big company, oil company here in the region, that is going through a process of data migration, and they have estimated that it will take them 4 years to do the job. A similar company using AI only needed 6 months to do the full integration using AI machine learning. So traditionally, like I said, you have to assign IT developers. They would meet basically, of course, they need to understand what is the global schema first. They need to meet with the IT or the business people to understand their business and try to basically write scripts in order to map the local basically schema to the global schema. Now, like Michael said, okay, you can scale, or you can basically process 25 data sources and twist my arm and I'll give you 50, but beyond that is impossible. So basically, just going quickly. Now, when you think about the ETL process currently, you are really going around and around in the same circle, in the same square, because by the time you develop a new rule, something has changed. Okay, and the job has never finishes. And research has told us that it is extremely labor intensive. It needs a lot of basically work to write these rules, and it is IT driven. It's not, I'm not against IT, but the people who understand the data are the business people. Okay, so but the way what we call the agile data using AI is now, because it's a machine driven, because you have somebody who are validating the recommendation of the algorithm. So with time, basically the remaining amount of work that is left to do by humans gets reduced, like this chart on the right says. Now, like I said, the MDM ETL approach, because of the nature of the manual approach, the more basically data sources you have, the more inclined to duplicate data you have, basically it increases like exponentially. Whereas, for instance, the AI-driven, basically you need some initial investment, but ultimately the machine learning will take over. Okay, I'm just going here a bit too fast, so that we can go directly. Okay, let's talk about this machine learning. Machine learning, like I said, AI is really designed to address this problem of scalability, which is really rampant in the data variety. So here, there is a lot of algorithms that you use in terms of even how to sample the data for machine learning, what tools do we use, what algorithms do we use, and ultimately how we treat the recommendation issue produced by the algorithm. It works something like this. This is the overall architecture, whereby you ingest the data. The algorithm automatically discovers what's the ideal schema. That's why we say it's bottom up, instead of, as for the ETL, defining the global schema a priori, then trying to fit your data to match that global schema, and the things are changing all the time. Now here, the schema is produced basically or suggested by the algorithm. Some companies, especially for instance, when you are talking about migration from legacy systems to new systems, you know, you already have the schema, so basically you can map automatically to that schema. Then there is something called crowdsourcing, which is the people So the experts are validating the recommendation of basically the algorithm, and this is working. The next step would be to deduplicate, and so on and so forth. We will give you some examples on that. So the promise of the AI is really to be able to integrate, like you see here, thousands, not 5, not 10, not 50, of data sources and millions of records. Mind you, Tamer now has been, the last statistics I have, they have been able to unify 41 billion records from their client, 41 billion. So probably this is more than all the work done by the ETL and other competitor put together. And things that take years are done in months, and things that take basically weeks are done in days. Why it works so perfect? Because it uses what I call the probabilistic approach. Now, when you think about Google, before Google came in 1998, you had always, I remember from my days, you have the Yahoo, Alta Vista, MSN, and so on. Why those basically search engines just disappeared? Why actually even Microsoft Bing, which has spent, Microsoft spent $10 billion to try to compete with, why it didn't succeed? Why? Because those guys, they had a team, they had an army of people trying to crawl to see what new sites have been published, websites, trying to index those websites and rank them. This job Google does automatically. So the first approach is called deterministic, because you need to know a priori what you need to do. The probabilistic is identified by the system, by the algorithm. So using this approach, using this algorithm, way back in 1998, Google was able to basically index 26 million sites. Just 2 years, that reached to 1 billion sites, websites. And 2018 is 1 trillion. Guess what? Probably 90% of the people today use Google. Why? Because you have the speed, you have the time, you have the accuracy and the relevance. You just enter your keywords, and most likely you will find the information that you are looking for. So this is exactly the approach that we use for data basically mastering. When you compare the rule-based versus the AI, it looks something like this. A typical ETL MDM projects will take 12 months and more, and a load of people to write the rules, to check the results, and so on. Whereas machine learning basically takes less than 3 months. And for these reasons, which I will not spend a lot of time. Now, in terms of the companies, the landscape, and this is useful for the guys who are doing data analytics and so on, because you need to have your data in order basically to be able to develop good AI models. We always try to assess and look at the data from two perspectives. One is the scale of deployment. Am I talking about data for one individual, one data scientist, one department, or for the whole enterprise? And the other dimension is the data. Is it varied? Is the degree of variation very low, or is it very high? Now, what you see here on this chart, and Tamer is the only company that can address enterprise-wide, enterprise scale, and with a huge level of basically data variety using probabilistic model. How it works, basically, we have a platform called Tamer Unify. We are pulling the data from all these sources, even external data, and even taxonomies. For instance, people who work in the industry, especially for the oil and gas, you have something called like the taxonomy. We will talk about that. So if you provide basically the taxonomy, you want, for instance, you want to do procurement optimization. You want to classify what you buy in terms of product, parts, and so on into clear, basically, taxonomies or classification, hierarchy, so that you are able to unify and bring down together the different parts, which they look differently in different systems. But I will not spend time on that because I have a GE case here. Then you see that data is fed into the Tamer platform, which does three things, like the schema mapping, the mastering, which is really the duplication, and the classification, and produce data available, a unified view of the data to the data scientists, to the BI guys, to the management, to the analysts, and so on. This is how it works. So basically, some of the application, like you see here, we can deduplicate and cleanse the data 90% faster than the traditional tools. Some of the applications, like I said, there is some companies are using Tamer basically to optimize their procurement, produce a unified view of the customer, with the customer mastering or the part mastering, spend classification. I'm going to give you an example, materials, product, and classification as well. Some of the big names that are using basically Tamer, we're talking about Thomson Reuters, because Thomson Reuters specialize in the accurate data. Thomson Reuters gets millions of data and sources daily. They need to ingest that data, analyze it, and produce reports that they sell to the market. How can you achieve that level of speed and accuracy? By writing rules. For instance, what you see here, it took them to integrate the data from 6 months that they traditionally do using rule-based, just to 2 weeks, and the data is integrated. GE will talk about it, Toyota and 40 million customer, 30 different languages, 250 databases, all done through Tamer. ExxonMobil for their oil and the data mastering and so on. There is another actually global online retailer, which we cannot disclose the name here. They are using Tamer to basically classify 630 million products. Why they want to classify that? Because when you want to go to their website and you search for a product, you shouldn't struggle to find it. It should be right there because of the good taxonomy, because of the good product classification. How it actually works from a business, usually traditionally, when we input our basically the name of the parts, this is more of the oil and gas, by the way, different companies, different department, even different technicians, they name it differently. Nowadays starting to become standardized, but usually this is the case. So for the same part, we have it in different stores and different stock levels, but because the is labeled differently, we cannot really get one picture of what we have. So we use machine learning basically to consolidate those 4 different names into one, which is really the gas lift valve. Then we take that information and you classify it. It falls under power transmission. Under power transmission, there is something called pumping unit. Then there is the gas lift. So think about it. If you have millions of those in 20 different systems, 50 different systems, and you are using this automated process of consolidating together the thing, cleansing them, producing golden record, you know how much time and value you can achieve. Now, this is a very useful, basically, use case. I would like you to take this into account. Now, GE, you see, over the years, especially in the time of Jack Welch and later on Jack Hellman, basically was extremely successful. The stock was never less than $70, $80. Until recently, it was even traded at $8 and $9. Now, their new CFO said to them, listen, guys, we should be able to save $100 million just from our global procurement. The problem is GE has different systems because GE grew over the years by acquisition of other companies. So before assigning Tamer, GE basically assigned over 1,000 developers working to reduce and unify 500 ERP systems, and they spent 4 years just to reduce them to 120 ERP system, and they stopped there. They wrote 500 rules, which actually Tamer used basically to train the model for the classification. So what did Tamer do is they took this 75 plus ERP system, which incidentally had 2 million what we call a non-unique supplier and 25 million non-unique part. Now, if you want to optimize, you want to have a single unique description of each supplier, a single unique description of each part, so that you take that information, go back to the big suppliers and negotiate with them. Because what happened, they discovered that for the same part, a bearing, for instance, from the same supplier was bought at different prices by different business units. Now, once GE had that information all together, they were actually able to go back to the supplier and squeeze for the price, because now they have the volume instead of buying a split purchase. So in less than 6 months, compare that to 4 years, they were able to reduce from 2 million non-unique supplier to 700,000, and from 2.5 million to 6.4 million non-unique parts. When GE, after this exercise, bought 3 new companies, the integration of those ERP systems into GE main ERP was done in less than 2 weeks. What happened over 4 years? GE was able to solve $400 million just by going back to supplier, negotiating a price, removing out of stock things that are duplicated, and so on. So this is a real case, and it's published in Forbes magazine if you want to look at that online. Another piece of work that our company, along with Tamer, did is the issue of helping on a pilot point basis some companies here that are migrating their data. Think about it. They have something in the ERP system. They have something called description. In one system, for instance, the description could be 400, 500 basically characters. But in the new system, it shouldn't be more than 40 to define it. Now, if you have 1 million or 10 million long records with this long description, how can you write rules basically to clean, first of all, this and make them unique, and later on basically reduce and truncate the length? So we use Tamer machine learning, for instance, on a sample of 800,000, we call them the long and inconsistent descriptions, to reduce them. They were, most of them, they duplicate, to 18,000. Mind you, the first iteration alone was able to basically treat and process 80% of the data sample. The SMEs who work for this, they say usually it takes us 2 to 3 months to do the job. We did it in 1 or 2 days. Same thing for the classification. I'm going to share with you this example, then I will stop. So just for people who are not in the industry, basically we have a technician or we have an engineer who does maintenance. Now there is some instruction that we put in the system, say like Maximo, for instance. This is what you should do, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we have the equipment. This is how we describe it. Now, like I said, every technician, every engineer will describe it. The same equipment or part is labeled differently. How can we unify all those into one? This is what we did. Basically, what we started is we took that 80,000 records, which are mainly inconsistent description, is long, is irregular, and we used basically, we removed the sort of the punctuation, the stop words like who and so on. We removed the repeating words, and we were able to clean it. So basically, but still long. Remind you, it has to be 40 characters or less in the new system. Then third step is we created clusters. We found out that the 80,000 records are actually, for somebody who doesn't know this, he thinks that we have 80,000 different description, 80,000 different parts or equipment. In fact, it's only 18,000. Then once we have those clusters, again, we use the algorithm to make sure that each cluster, we picked up one description. If it happens to be basically less than 40 and it's accurate, we accept it. Otherwise, we overwrote it. And this is how it works. You see, the Tamer algorithm asks what they call the SME, the subject matter expert. What it does a pairwise comparison, comparing this record and that record. And it asks you one question. If you think, you see, it gives you a recommendation. It tells you, we think that this record on the left and the record on the right, based on the attributes and based on the content of the records, we think they match. That's why you see it on the left, match, which recommended by basically by Tamer. But the SME might say no, they don't match, or they say yes, indeed they match. So he only presses equal sign or the stop sign. And this is how the algorithm works. So works. For instance, you look at this. For the same description, we have 18,000 records. Or sorry, we have 80 clusters, but we have 269 records, all talking about the same thing. Some of them are more than 40, some of them are less. Now, if we find something automatically less than 40, but it's representative, we take it. Otherwise, like I said, we wrote some rules to produce the golden record, and we overwrite like you see here. But ultimately, this is what we do. In 1 or 2 days, this job was done. Same thing quickly for the classification. Again, I just want you to know that in the plant, for instance, there is standards. There is one standard ISO 14224, which actually classifies the industry. So it's oil and gas or utilities. Now we have this plant in Jubail. We have this gas processing plant. We have this, I don't know, the heating or the boilers, and so on and so forth. For instance, in the old system of this company, they had 21 different levels, whereas in the new system is only 8, actually not 9 as written here. How can you have, when you have millions of records, sorry, let me have some more. So you want, basically, you have millions of records, different 21 levels. You need to correct them, cleanse them, and bring them to 8 levels. How can you expect a rule base basically to work? It never does. That's why you see this ETL, this MDM technologies for big project never materialize. So actually we were able, basically using the rules that we had from that client, basically to classify the 18,000 or 16,000 records, and we produced, I'm just going quickly here, we were able to produce basically 8 levels, which really represent like 5,000 records out of the 16,000. So we were able basically to classify correctly in just the first iteration. Of course, we could go for 2 and 3 iterations to have more accurate results. So basically, I can stop here. I have other use cases. Probably I leave it to you guys for any question, any comments. And sorry for taking too long on. So I will close. I will.
دكتور اذا تبي تتيح الفرصه للاخوان اذا في اسئله، لان انا عندي سؤال يمكن تشوفه بالشات. ف up to you. تبي نخلي الاخوان يعني يدخلون؟
Yes, please. If you have any question, or you start with you, Doctor. معلش. I don't see on the chat. I don't see the question. Have you typed it?
Okay. أنا الحين.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. What are the standards? Yeah, I think وصل. Yeah.
Okay.
Now
you can conclude وتشوف الإخوان إذا في عندهم أسئلة أو أي نقاش موضوع معين تحبون.
Yes.
It's up to you.
Very good. Basically, Doctor, the quality of the data quality depends really on the industry. For instance, in the oil and gas, there is specific basically quality standards that we follow. And there is attributes for what we mean by accurate data. So these are documented, usually in the literature, they are available. And my focus is more on the oil and gas, utilities, and government as well.
فلو الإخوان يشاركونا بالرغبة، يعني هل في رغبة في أحد عنده أسئلة يعني يوجهها الدكتور محمد بشكل مباشر أو تبون عن طريق الشات؟ ف سأبتيو دكتور محمد الزهراني معانا.
يعطيك العافية دكتور، يعطيكم العافية جميعا. دكتور سؤالي بس، هل يعني هذا النوع من الابلكيشنز انتم the records that you mentioned inside the app, it's more than billions. Is it the kind of cubes tables or just normal tables?
If I understood it correctly, Doctor, we're talking about records. When we unify data, we are counting the number of records in each data source. So the 41 billion represent that total number of all the records for all the client that Tamer was able to unify.
Okay. No. So do you think this kind of applications can be fit in the education context, like universities or schools?
Yeah. for instance, I tell you for a fact, Doctor, in life science, which is not very far from the education, you see, for instance, for Novartis, which is a Swiss company, they had 30,000 researchers working in different parts of the world, different languages, and using different labels for their product and their basically research. Now, when the company wanted to integrate all that together in one place, so that people are aware of what's being done and published by their colleagues across the globe, they struggled. I don't know how many rules, 10,000 or rules they wrote, but they were not able to. So basically, Tamer helped them standardize the labeling of all those products or sort of molecules that they do, and produce a unified view in one language that is accessible to all of them. As far as education is concerned, yes, Dr. Antum, you have plenty of data sets within the university, within the Ministry of Education or higher education and so on. You have a lot of data from other government agencies like the Labor Ministry, for instance, like the telecommunication. Really, what the government expects from you is to produce graduate that should help the economy tomorrow with the right skills. Now, this is a big question for you. What courses, what programs are we really able to design to make sure that they will contribute to the economy, assuming that we have predicted what future jobs look like? So correct. This is a potential application where, Doctor, you need to unify really loads and a huge number of disparate data spread over different agencies, government, ministries, even externally.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you.
العفو والشكر.
I appreciate. يعطيك العافية.
طيب الإخوان الباقيين الحضور، إذا أنا ما أدري هل أحد جرب لأن احنا سوينا الحين إن everybody can talk, can use the feature talking. But it's up to them to unmute themselves. This is what I think.
Okay, fine. We still have some time, Doctor. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. دكتور أحمد الشرقاوي وينه؟ ما أشوفه. دكتور أحمد. عموما إذا ما في أسئلة اعتقادي it's up to you دكتور إن يعني we can cook.
I think with that, I would like to thank you, Dr. Lanzi, for arranging this. I would like to thank the delegates, starting with Dr. Muhammad that I was speaking to now, and inshallah hope to have another opportunity to chat with you, to connect with you guys. And my apology if I took more than I should, and my apology if I spoke something which is not really very relevant to you guys. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
شكرا دكتور، مشكورين على حضوركم.
العفو والشكر. السلام عليكم.
مع السلامة.